Hello, this video recording is for the first part of the cell energy dynamic module, which is actually on cellular respiration, enzymes, and the ATP cycle. So this portion of the recording, I will cover chemical reactions, the ATP cycle, and enzymes. So for the first part of the video, you will need to be able to describe the conservation of energy, and you will need to understand the difference between exergonic and endergonic reactions. So this image is showing you two types of energy, potential energy and kinetic energy. So you can see the definitions on the screen. Potential energy is what we call stored energy, and kinetic energy is the energy of motion. Now I'm going to explain what these two types of energy are, and then we will apply it to chemical reactions. So think about this picture. When the boy and the ball are at the bottom of the hill, the ball has no potential energy. It's lying on the ground without motion, and gravity is holding it to the ground. Now, in order for the person to push the ball up the hill, he has to put energy into pushing the ball. So it's raising the height of the ball above the ground. So now this ball has the potential to do work, to roll down the hill by virtue of its position. So in order for an object to have potential energy, you have to put energy into moving the object so that it can then move to go back to its original position. So potential energy is the amount of energy that was put into rolling the ball up the hill. Now, kinetic energy is when the ball rolls down the hill. Now, this is energy transformation. We are going from potential energy or stored energy to kinetic, or the energy of movement. Now, this ties into the law of conservation of energy. So you may remember hearing this before, but energy is neither created or destroyed. It only changes forms. So I'm going to write that down here for you. So energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can change forms. And what I mean by that is shown here in this image. So let's look at the car. So here, chemical energy is put into the car in the form of gasoline. Okay, now gasoline and most fuels are really long chains of carbon and hydrogen bonded together. Now, when that gasoline is broken down, all those bonds are broken up, it releases energy. And that energy is used to turn the motor or engine of the car. You can tell I don't know much about cars. So the energy is going from the chemical energy in gasoline to the actual movement of the vehicle. That is energy changing forms. Now, anytime that energy changes form, some of that energy is lost as heat. That's why when your vehicle is running, there's heat coming off of the car. So just to repeat the information, the law of the conservation of energy is that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only change forms. Now, when energy does change forms, some of that energy is lost as heat. Now, let's apply this concept to chemical reactions. So a chemical reaction is either exergonic or endergonic. So let's look at an endergonic reaction. That's right here on the top of your image. Now, first of all, large molecules with many bonds have high potential energy. When these bonds are broken up, energy is released. So if there are many, many bonds, there's the potential to release a great deal of energy. Now, if you look at endergonic, on my slide, it says that endergonic reactions require energy. So what this means is that energy has to be put into the system, be it like your body or a cell, so that chemical bonds can be built up, right? Endergonic reactions form chemical bonds. So I'm going to write here, energy used to form chemical bonds. Okay, so you go from small molecule to, I should say molecules, to a large molecule. Okay, we are going from small molecules with just a little bit of potential energy, not very many bonds, to a large molecule that has a lot of potential energy. Now, an exergonic relationship, or I'm sorry, an exergonic reaction is the opposite. Energy exits the system. So energy is released when bonds are broken. And it goes from a large molecule to small. Okay, those bonds are being broken in that large molecule. This gives off energy. Energy exits the system. And what you're left with are small molecules with just a few bonds. So you're going from high potential energy to low potential energy. So let's take a look at how this is represented in a graph. So on the left-hand side, we have an endergonic reaction. So remember, energy is entering the system. So on this y-axis, I'm going to put potential energy. I'm going to abbreviate that. A capital E is the symbol for energy. So if you look right here on my graph where I'm circling, that would be a small molecule, very few bonds. Its potential energy is low. So I'm going to write small right here. Now, energy is put into the system. And what you end up with on this side is a molecule with many chemical bonds, a large molecule that has high potential energy. So remember that endergonic, you are going from small molecules, you're putting them together, you're forming bonds, and you end up with a large molecule. Now, on the right-hand side, we have exergonic. Energy exits the system. You are going from high potential energy to low. So here we have a large molecule to start with, many chemical bonds. These chemical bonds are broken, energy is released, and you end up down here with a small molecule. or multiple small molecules. Okay, so here we have them right here, small. Okay, so a chemical reaction in which you go from a large molecule to small molecules is exergonic. So now we are going to apply what you just learned about exergonic and endergonic and look at the ATP cycle. So you need to know the parts of ATP. You need to be able to describe the ATP cycle. And then you are going to contrast phosphorylation with dephosphorylation. So here we have a picture of ATP. Now, I want you to take a moment and think about what other type of molecule this looks like. And once you determine that, you should be able to figure out which group of biological molecules ATP fits into. Is it a carbohydrate, a protein, a lipid, or a nucleic acid? So what you should have noticed here is that ATP has a very similar structure to a nucleotide. So ATP is a nucleic acid. It has phosphates, 3 of them, a sugar, which is ribose, and adenosine is almost the same structure as the base adenine that you find in DNA and RNA. So the components of ATP are 3 phosphates, a sugar, and a base, adenosine. So now let's take a look at the ATP cycle. Now, you may have remembered from earlier lectures that I talked about the fact that ATP is the molecule used for cellular energy, right? You can't eat food and your body just use the food as it is. That food is used to make ATP, and ATP is what your cell uses to do work. So first of all, what do I mean by cellular work? I'm gonna write that over here. So ATP is used to do cellular work. So that would be things like making large molecules, right? Because that would be an endergonic reaction, and ATP provides the energy from that. It could also be used for breaking down organelles. Sorry about that. Thought I had my phone off. Breaking down organelles. Okay, and other things that your cell needs to do. For instance, it could even be used for things like muscle contraction. Remember that muscle contraction occurs with protein fibers. So let's take a look at the ATP cycle. Now, up on top here is where we have ATP. So ATP actually stands for adenosine triphosphate, tri meaning 3. So ATP, here it says ATP. Here you have 3 phosphates. Now, one of these phosphates is going to be released. Okay, so P is the symbol for phosphate. So a phosphate is released. Now you end up with a DP, adenosine diphosphate, di meaning 2. So you start with 3 phosphates, 1 phosphate is released. Now you have a molecule with 2 phosphates. So I want you to think for a second, is this an exergonic reaction or endergonic? Are you going large to small or small to large? So you should realize that this is an exergonic reaction because a bond is being broken and a phosphate is being released. So I'm going to write energy released. So in the cell, when ATP loses a phosphate and becomes a DP, that gives off energy that is then used to do work in the cell. Now, this is a cycle, right? So it keeps going around and around. So now you have a DP, the molecule with 2 phosphates, and a phosphate is added to get ATP. So ADP to ATP. So this is an endergonic reaction. It requires energy because you are forming a bond. So endergonic requires, I'm just going to write a capital E there. So where does that energy come from to make ATP? Right? You have ADP, you need energy to make ATP. Well, we keep talking about food, right? Carbohydrates are a source of energy. So the energy for the ATP cycle to build ATP comes from the breakdown of food molecules, which is also called cellular respiration. So cellular respiration provides energy for the cycle. Okay, so the ATP cycle alternates between exergonic and endergonic. Now, I mentioned the terms phosphorylation and dephosphorylation. So it sounds complicated, but it really just means adding or removing a phosphate. So when we go from ATP to ADP, this is dephosphorylation. Phosphate is removed. When we go from ADP to ATP, this is called phosphorylation. Phosphate is added. So dephosphorylation is exergonic, phosphorylation is endergonic. This is another image of the ATP cycle. I presented it in 2 different ways so that you could understand how it functions. So once again, we have ATP on the top. Okay, here is our ATP adenosine triphosphate. It loses a phosphate, so we call that dephosphorylation. It gives off energy because this is exergonic. And then you end up with a DP, 2 phosphates. Now, on the other half of the cycle, a phosphate is added, energy is required, and that comes from cell respiration. And the result is that you get ATP. So to keep my video short, I'm going to stop here. Then I will make a video on enzymes. Now, just to review what you learned in this lesson, you need to know the law of conservation of energy. Energy is not created or destroyed, it just changes forms. And when it does this, some of that energy is lost as heat. You learned about exergonic and endergonic chemical reactions. Endergonic, you are building bonds. Energy enters the system. You're going from small molecules to large. Exergonic, you are breaking bonds. Energy exits the system and you're going from large molecules to small. Then you need to apply these concepts to the ATP cycle. ATP to ADP is exergonic and it provides energy for cellular work. ADP to ATP is endergonic. You are building a bond. And the energy for that reaction comes from cellular respiration.